Hey man, I'm Jessica from Proud Money. In this video, we are going to look at the average net worth by age and then also some other factors. The numbers we are going to use come from the Wealth of Households report from the U.S. Census. This is the most recent one, as I make this video at least, that is from the summer of 2025. Real quick, net worth equals assets minus liabilities, what you own minus what you owe on what you own. So assets are going to be things like your house, your cars, your savings, your investments. Liabilities are going to be things like whatever you still owe on that house, what is on your mortgage or what you have in car loans or any other debt that you might have. So assets minus liabilities equals net worth. So let's start out at the highest level here. The average net worth for U.S. households, $191,100. Now, what we are going to see repeatedly when we look at this number is that people have a very large amount on average of their net worth tied up in their homes. So when we look at that 191,000 plus number, over $129,000 on average of it tied up in people's homes as home equity. Only about 60-some thousand is going to be assets outside of that, meaning things like savings, investments, and other assets. So about 68% on average of net worth tied up in the home, only about 32% on average with other assets. Now that 191,000 number is right down the middle, the 50% mark, but you might be interested to know what it would take to be in the top 10%, the top 25%, or maybe the lowest 25%, or the lowest 10%. So we're gonna look at those numbers next, but I do wanna mention first off that we are talking about households, which could mean anything from two parents with multiple children in the house to a single person and everything in between. So this is not necessarily one person's net worth that we are talking about. I also should mention here that we are actually using median as the numbers that we are talking about versus average, because average in this case we're talking about typical. Mathematically, average is a different calculation. Median makes more sense because it is the typical sort of right down the middle person that fits all these various categories. And if you want to talk more about that in the comments, we can do so. All right, so to be in the top 10% of households in terms of net worth, you would need to have $1,806,000. So quite a bit in order to get yourself up into that top 10%. Top 25%, $671,400. We've already talked about what that middle number is, the 191. And then the lowest 25%, if your net worth is $19,420 or lower, you would be in the lowest 25%. Unless, of course, you made it into the lowest 10%, which means that you had zero net worth or a negative net worth. And remember, net worth is assets minus liabilities. So some people actually have more debt than they actually have in assets. The number for the top 1% is actually not nailed down in this report that comes from the U.S. Census, and really anywhere else that you look for that information, there's sort of some estimates being made versus there being any hard numbers. Usually that top 1%, the estimates are going to be at least $10 million of net worth. I've also seen sort of $12 to $14 million as the net worth to be in that top 1%. All right, now let's look at net worth by age. A note here, at least for the moment, we are still talking about households. So this is going to be based off of the person that is sort of the head of household, or at least whoever has their name on the mortgage or on the rental. So if we are talking about under 35, the average net worth, $30,500. And then you'll also see that I punched out the numbers here in terms of how much of that is home equity and how much of that is outside. Those under 35 are going to be the most likely to have less of their net worth actually tied up in a home at around 44%. And then as we go up the age scale, you're going to see here that it goes up and up in terms of how much of net worth is tied up in the home. So 35 to 44, over 143,000 of net worth, you'll see 64% in the home. So a big jump right there. 45 to 54, we're up over 200,000 as net worth. 55 to 64, up over 300,000. Kind of in the same range there from 65 all the way up to 75, and even 75 plus we can see still kind of hangs in that same range from $350,000 to $400,000, and you see those 75 and over have the most tied up in their home. Now, if you're a single person watching this video, you might feel like some of those numbers don't apply to you because households can mean multiple people. However, the U.S. Census luckily has some numbers for single person households. So overall, single person households have a net worth of $88,910, and 73% of that amount actually tied up in home equity on average for single people, so not super liquid. When we look by age, these ranges are not necessarily as granular as the ones we were just looking at before. So under 35, 9,536 as an average net worth. Only 30% tied up in home equity for people under 35, which makes sense because obviously most people tend to buy their homes a little bit older. Then when we jump up to the 35 to 54 range, 92,500 as average net worth. 68% of that though tied up in home equity. So a big jump there, and then it kind of stays the same from 55 to 64, where net worth actually goes down a little bit to over 75,000. And then when we look at 65 and over, $199,600 at net worth, and 79% of that tied up in homes. This makes some sense because oftentimes once we get up into some of these older ages, we may have people that were married and have lost a spouse, and so they are now single, and so they have some of the accumulated wealth from their lifetime, but now are single in a different way than the younger singles. And maybe to drive that point home a little bit more in terms of the average net worth of households with married people versus single people, married couple households average net worth $415,000 versus the $88,900 that I just told you for single person households. All right, now we're going to break those numbers out a few other ways that might be of interest to you, starting with race/ethnicity. I'm going to use the labels that the census uses, so if you don't like those, blame the census and not me. The average net worth of Asian Americans, $384,500. 28% of Asian households are millionaires. White-only households, $285,800 as an average net worth. 22% of those households are millionaire households. Hispanic, $54,700 as average net worth. Only 7% of those households are millionaire households. Black, $33,370. Only 5% of those are millionaire households. Looking at net worth by education levels, probably not a ton of surprises here. For people that did not complete high school, average net worth $9,000. Graduate of high school, $64,000. Some college, but no degree, over $100,000. If you have an associate's degree, $158,000 on average. Bachelor's degree, $295,000 plus on average as a net worth. And then you can see a graduate or professional degree is going to be over twice as much as those with just a bachelor's degree at $592,000 plus. Remember that that is going to be your doctors, your lawyers, and other advanced degrees where those people tend to make a lot of money once they actually have that degree. Looking at net worth by region of the country, the western part of the U.S. is the winner here, you might say, with $277,200 as the average net worth. Northeast, $223,000 plus. Midwest, $177,000 plus. And the South, $159,800. And then a final breakout here that may or may not feed into your known or unknown biases. Households that have all of the members born in the United States have a $197,800 net worth on average. In households where any of the members are born outside of the United States, that average $164,400. So those are the numbers I think you will find the most interesting, but if you want to look even closer, you can go to that census report yourself. There's a link down below in the description. Questions or comments, welcome those down below. Otherwise, I thank you for watching.